What up, guys? This is
Cheevo, guys!
Back here again with another video. Today, we're going to be focused on 20 ways that Xbox can win 2021. Now, obviously, everybody's opinion is different, so this list is subjective. It is influenced by my personal feelings, tastes, and opinions. This video is basically like if I got hired by Xbox to be Phil Spencer's right-hand man. So we're going to be going over a list of 20 recommendations that I would make to Phil so that Xbox could win 2021. Now, first thing you're going to notice is this isn't your average Xbox list that you see in other YouTube videos. I've dug real deep to find the old school Xbox exclusive games so that we can bring back and remaster some Xbox classics. Now, before we get started, I want to point out that I use a randomizer on this list because it was too hard to prioritize them in order. So these are randomized, and these are the 20 things that I recommend that Xbox does to win 2021. Well, hold up. Actually, I may have lied. I did put one of these things above all. The number one thing on my list would be to bring back Banjo. For those of you that don't know, Banjo Kazooie is by far one of my favorite games of all time. It's easily my favorite Nintendo 64 game. Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie were a huge part of my childhood. It's actually one of the main reasons I became an Xbox fan in the first place, is because Microsoft had purchased Rare, and I knew that all of the Rare games were going to end up on Xbox. So like a lot of people, I got the Xbox hoping that I would see the next Banjo Kazooie game and Conker game on the Xbox. Now, in terms of new games, we never really got any. We only ended up getting one new Banjo game, that was Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts on the Xbox 360, and we ended up getting the Conker Bad Fur Day remake on the original Xbox. Other than that, the licenses for these IPs have pretty much just been sitting there. Trust me, I could rant about Banjo Kazooie this whole video. Microsoft and Xbox pretty much alley-ooped themselves when they added Banjo Kazooie to Nintendo Switch. They definitely should have announced a new Banjo Kazooie at that moment, but we all know they did not. So my number one recommendation to Phil Spencer would be to create a new Banjo Kazooie or remaster Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie. Alright, so the next 19 things are randomized, guys. The next one being Perfect Dark. Now, Xbox's brand new studio, The Initiative, has been secretly working on this game for probably a couple years now, and it finally got announced at the Video Game Awards 2020. Now, interesting enough, this is actually the second instance where Rare let another studio in the Microsoft umbrella develop a game for one of their IPs. We seen this first in 2020 when Delilah Studios developed Battletoads. And now Microsoft has let The Initiative use the Perfect Dark IP, which is another IP originally developed by Rare. This remake is really looking to be huge, guys. They have really been hiring a lot of talent. The game has been confirmed to be a first-person shooter. Now, we all know this game has already been announced. My recommendation to Phil would be take your time. We don't want this to become the next Cyberpunk. But with that being said, I'm pretty sure they are already pretty deep into this project. I don't think it's going to be releasing in 2021, but hopefully we can at least get some gameplay by the end of the year. The next one, I'm really glad that the randomizer put it in the top 5 because I think this one is super important and it's highly anticipated, and that is the return of Sam Fisher, aka the Splinter Cell games. Now, my recommendation to Phil isn't necessarily to go purchase all of Ubisoft, but if you can get the next Splinter Cell game to be an Xbox exclusive, then you can really start getting some momentum going for Xbox. And trust me, guys, this isn't too out there. We've seen a Splinter Cell be a console exclusive before, as Microsoft had paid to make Splinter Cell Conviction an Xbox exclusive back in the Xbox 360 days. So the return of Sam Fisher on Xbox is highly recommended. And next on the list, we're going to be talking about Ryse. Ryse is by far my favorite Xbox exclusive on the Xbox One. Sadly enough, it was a launch title, and I thought it was just the beginning in terms of brand new Xbox exclusives. But little did I know, I would go a whole console generation without finding a game that I loved just as much as Ryse. The game includes a single-player campaign, as well as a few multiplayer modes. If you haven't had a chance to try out Ryse yet, I highly recommend doing so if you have Xbox Game Pass or Game Pass Ultimate, because it is included. Now, there's only one caveat, and that is the fact that this game is developed by Crytek and it is published by Microsoft. So in order for there to be a Ryse 2, Microsoft would have to cut a deal with Crytek for them to come back and develop the second game. Because as you can all imagine, if you want the game to be as great as the first one, you definitely want to get Crytek to come back and develop the second one. So the recommendation for Phil would be to cut a deal with Crytek and make Ryse 2. It obviously doesn't need a release this year, just announce it and everybody will be happy. And next on the list is Halo Infinite. First and foremost, I want to give props to Xbox in terms of how they've handled Halo Infinite. The original trailer and gameplay that they released earlier in the year wasn't up to par with people's expectations, and they ended up realizing that the game needed more time. So sadly, at least for a Halo fan, the game got delayed into 2021. Now, the 20th anniversary for the original Halo is actually on November 15th, so more than likely that's probably the day that we're going to end up seeing this game finally be released. Now, I recommend that they have some sort of battle royale mode and that they make it free to play. This will attract a lot of players into the Halo franchise, pretty much pulling a similar move to the Call of Duty franchise. They have their main titles, which, cost $69.99 if you're playing on next gen, or the traditional $59.99 if you're playing on current gen. But on top of that, they have the Battle Royale multiplayer only releases that are free to play. I really think Halo would be a lot of fun when you're playing with 100 people in the same match. But ultimately, the main recommendation that I would make to Phil would be to take your time with Halo. Even though it had one delay already, if you need to delay it again, do it. There was a couple delays with Cyberpunk, and we all know the truth is it needed another delay. And yeah, it would have made a lot of people sad, but ultimately it needed more time. They really probably genuinely thought that they were going to make people happy by releasing the game already, but it ended up being a worse move in the end because people didn't get the game that they were expecting. If you would have just held off, people would have ended up getting a proper game, and more than likely it would be a Game of the Year contender. So Xbox may feel the pressure to release the game on the 20th anniversary on November 15th, but ultimately, if the game is not ready, do not release it. This is by far Xbox's biggest franchise, and we definitely don't want Microsoft or Xbox to mess this up. On to the next one. My next recommendation would be to add bikes to Forza. I really think it's about time that they introduce motorcycles into the Forza franchise. Now, Xbox did announce Forza Motorsport, which appears to be either a reboot or a live service version of Forza that will, just get updated over time. But I don't know, my gut feeling is that they release Forza Horizon 5 before they actually release this next installment in the Forza Motorsport series. Who knows, either way, they're probably a year apart from releasing from each other. I just hope that they add motorcycles in one of the next Forza games, preferably the next Forza Horizon game, because then you can also include off-road style dirt bikes. I really think it would be a good way to mix up the Forza series, because let's be honest, the games are near perfect and they're great every year, super consistent, but they're getting redundant. It's pretty much the same thing all the time, just in a different environment. I guess the old saying is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I do think that that is true. They shouldn't change it up at all, but they should consider adding motorcycles and dirt bikes. Next, we have add UPlay to Gamepass. Now, UPlay Plus was announced by Ubisoft last year, and it's pretty much similar to EA Play or Xbox Game Pass. It's a streaming service by Ubisoft where you can play all of their titles. The only thing was that it only released on PC. It's not available on consoles. Hopefully, they'll end up releasing it on consoles, and if they do, Xbox Game Pass should definitely collaborate with them and make sure that UPlay Plus is included with the Xbox Game Pass Ultimate membership. It was actually rumored recently that UPlay Plus is going to be coming to consoles, so if in fact that does come true, I would highly recommend to Phil Spencer and Xbox that they cut that check for Ubisoft and include UPlay Plus with the Xbox Game Pass Ultimate membership. But let's be honest, at that point, Xbox Game Pass would have so much value, they would have to increase the price, at least the price to have UPlay Plus included in your membership. Probably a $5 increase compared to the price on UPlay Plus. I think it's like $14.99 a month. Next is one I probably should have had second on my list, and that is a Conker Reboot. Conker's Bad Fur Day probably is my second favorite game on the Nintendo 64, another game developed by Rare. Xbox ended up purchasing Rare, as I mentioned earlier in the Banjo Kazooie portion of this video, and they ended up releasing a remastered version on the original Xbox of Conker's Bad Fur Day. Not only that, but it included an Xbox Live feature on the multiplayer where you could actually play the game online with friends. And that right there is the reason why I don't understand why Microsoft has let this IP sit for so long. It has so much more opportunity than Banjo Kazooie, even though I love Banjo Kazooie a lot, and that's because this game has a multiplayer mode. The game had a multiplayer mode back on the Nintendo 64, and they revamped the multiplayer on the remastered version for the original Xbox. So if I were Xbox, I'd recommend starting off with a proper remaster of this game. I know it's a second remaster, but that's where you need to start with it. I think that's pretty much the strategy at this point, based off of the way that, Crash Bandicoot went about doing things. The best way to do it is to remaster the old games, get everybody back in the loop of an old franchise, and once everybody is back and attached to a franchise, then you can go ahead and release a proper sequel, like Crash Bandicoot did with the Insane Trilogy, and then once everybody started getting into Crash again, they finally released Crash 4. I really think this is the best strategy to take for Microsoft in terms of approaching Conker and Banjo remakes, just because there's going to be people that want it to be true to the original, but there's also going to be people that want a new version of it. So you can satisfy both of those audiences by making a proper remaster of the original and then releasing a sequel to the original. Now I want to talk about the multiplayer in Conker. I think this game makes for a perfect battle royale game. If they had a 1 vs 100 game or like a 50 vs 50 all-out war in a Conker game, I think that would be really popular online for Xbox. So ultimately, my recommendation to Microsoft would be to re-release Conker, a proper remaster. Don't mess with the original game, just remaster it, 4K modern day graphics, and then after that you can go ahead and make a sequel to Conker's Bad Fur Day. Not only that, but you have to nail the multiplayer. I think there's a lot of potential with the multiplayer, again, with some sort of battle royale mode. So if you can release a proper remake or remaster with the revamped multiplayer, kind of like they modernized it back in the day with the live and reloaded version for the original Xbox, we just need to do that for modern day. If Microsoft can manage to do this, I think all of the Conker fans will be happy. Alright, next I want to talk about Avowed. Avowed was announced as an Xbox exclusive developed by Obsidian, the first game that they're developing after being acquired by Microsoft in 2020. This game has been confirmed to be a first-person RPG. It's going to be similar to the Skyrim experience, at least it sounds like it's going to be. Obsidian has made a ton of first-person RPGs before, and that is exactly why Microsoft acquired them. I think Avowed is going to be at least a 9 out of 10, maybe close to a 10 out of 10 or Game of the Year contender. But specifically, Avowed in 2021, I just hope we see some gameplay. If we do, I think we'll see it towards the end of the year. If anything, I think this game is a couple years out from releasing, probably about at least 2 or 3 years from releasing. But again, at least if we can get a small clip of gameplay, just so we have an idea of what the game's like and what it's about, that would be great. So my recommendation to Phil in regards to Avowed, just give us a small gameplay clip, maybe at the Video Game Awards at the end of the year, just to pump everybody up. Next on our list is to release a VR headset. Xbox has said that this isn't a priority to them over and over again. However, we have all seen the success that the PSVR has had. Not only that, but for me personally, there's just a lot of cool VR games that are starting to come out now that the technology, has been out for a few years and it's cheaper than it used to be. When it first came out, it was, towards $700-800 to get a headset for PC. And then PSVR came out, making VR under $500. And then finally, most recently, the Oculus Quest came out. That headset is completely wireless. You don't even need a PC for an Oculus Quest anymore. That one's only $299, same price as the PSVR. So all of a sudden, we have 2 high-quality VR headsets available at the $300 price point. So more families are going to be able to afford the technology. At this point, I think it's the perfect time for Xbox to jump into the VR scene. Not only that, but there would be a ton of awesome exclusives that we could make for Xbox VR. And not only the exclusives, but you could try to get access or cut deals for some of the best third-party VR games, like maybe Half-Life Alyx or the new Medal of Honor VR game. That one's developed by Respawn, the same developer of Titanfall and Apex. That one seems to be a really good VR game as well that I wish I could play, but again, don't have a VR headset, so I'm hoping that Xbox jumps on the VR train soon. Next, we have Ninja Gaiden. The original reboot was released for the OG Xbox and the PS2. Ninja Gaiden 2, however, was an Xbox 360 exclusive, so we know that Microsoft is capable of cutting this deal. Now, Ninja Gaiden 3 was cross-platform. It ended up being released on both the Xbox 360 as well as the PS3. Since then, there's been some special versions of Ninja Gaiden 3, like Razor's Edge, for instance, that have been exclusive to the PlayStation console. So Ryu Hayabusa has found himself in a bit of back and forth in terms of exclusivity. Now, I think it's about time that we see Ninja Gaiden come back to Xbox as an exclusive. I think that getting Ninja Gaiden 4 as an Xbox Series X exclusive is probably a top priority move if I'm Phil Spencer, and if it's not, I recommend that it is. Next, I want to talk about Fable. I don't think that this game needs to be released in 2021 by no means. I do think that we need to see a glimpse of gameplay by the end of the year, however. And that's just so that we can get a good idea of what we're getting into with the reboot made by Playground Games. There's one thing for sure, Playground Games makes excellent and beautiful environments. They have done this consistently with the Forza Horizon franchise. For me, the most important thing in a new Fable game is not only for it to be a great RPG, but for it to have the same witty humor that the original trilogy had. That and the inclusion of a good and evil mechanic. As long as it has that foundation, I think it's headed in the right direction. Next, we have Fusion Frenzy. By far one of the best original Xbox games, and another really great IP that Microsoft owns that for some reason is stagnant. I thought we were headed in the right direction once they released Fusion Frenzy 2 on the Xbox 360, but we never got a Fusion Frenzy on the next generation, which was the Xbox One, and hopefully we'll get our next installment on the Xbox Series X this next generation. Because again, this is another really awesome IP owned by Microsoft that they just have sitting there. Online Battle Royale party games are actually really popular right now, all due to the Fall Guys craze, so I think that Xbox can really capitalize on that momentum by releasing an online party game in Fusion Frenzy 3 or maybe Fusion Frenzy Online. The question is who's going to develop it? We have a lot of developers under the Microsoft umbrella now. Let me know who you guys think should develop the next Fusion Frenzy down in the comments below. This next one might catch you guys a little off guard, but it's to re-release the Xbox 360 controller. The only reason I say this is because I think it would be cool to be able to use all of the Xbox controllers on the modern day console, the Xbox Series X. We can use all of them currently except for the Xbox 360 controller. Just because the original OG Xbox controller, the Duke, it was actually re-released by Hyperkin. If you don't have it yet, I highly recommend investing in one. It's really cool because you can play an OG Xbox game via backwards compatibility. And you know, back in the day, you had a black and a white button. And if you have that Hyperkin controller, you can play an OG Xbox game via backwards compatibility with no issues or button remapping required. Next, we have another one that not a lot of people talk about, and that is Stubbs the Zombie. Stubbs the Zombie was actually a really awesome Xbox exclusive back on the OG Xbox. I really wish that they would have added this to the Xbox backwards compatibility. This game definitely deserves a proper remake. Obviously, it's rated M for mature. The humor in the game really reminds me of Destroy All Humans. It's pretty much like a Destroy All Humans vibe, but rated M for mature. You play a zombie in a third-person view, and what your goal is to convert all of the humans to zombies. This is actually a really rare and awesome concept. You would think that there's a lot of games where you play as the zombie, but there's actually not. There's not a lot of games where you play as a zombie. Most of the games, you're killing the zombies. So this is a rare instance where you get to play as the zombie, which is pretty cool. So Xbox, if you're listening, remake Stubbs the Zombie. And next on the list, we have Killer Instinct 2. I definitely think that the Killer Instinct reboot deserves a sequel. It was probably my second favorite launch title behind Ryse. But yeah, it definitely deserves a sequel. There's a lot of characters that they had in the OG Killer Instinct games that they didn't end up releasing in the remake. If you guys haven't had a chance to play it already, I want to say that it's part of Xbox Gamepass. If it's not, I highly recommend purchasing it. It's still to this day one of my favorite fighting games on the Xbox One. Iron Galaxy definitely did a great job with this game. I'm really hoping that they make a sequel. I'm not too sure if it would be developed by the same developer, but I would highly recommend that Microsoft pays out to have Iron Galaxy make a second one. And you know what? Now that I realize it, there's actually 3 instances where Rare let another developer remake their games, and that is with Killer Instinct. I mentioned it earlier and I said there was only 2 instances with, Battletoads and now Perfect Dark, but I guess it did also happen with Killer Instinct. Anyhow, just wanted to correct myself real quick. But yeah, to summarize this recommendation, Killer Instinct 2. And next we have Viva Piñata 3. I really think that Microsoft should be paying attention to the Animal Crossing hype, because they could have had that same hype with the brand new Viva Piñata game. If they aren't already, I definitely think that Rare should be making a 3rd game. They already released 2 games, and they were released pretty close to each other. I think that's why maybe people got Viva Piñata out. They had even released a Viva Piñata party game that was kind of like a Mario Party clone. That game actually wasn't too bad, but off subject, I'm not talking about the party game. I'm talking about the mainline Viva Piñata series. Now, they made Viva Piñata and then they made Viva Piñata Trouble in Paradise. I think it would be proper if they made Viva Piñata 3. Not only would it be awesome that we get a new Viva Piñata game, but maybe they could capitalize on making the game available on xCloud, so that maybe, you could play Viva Piñata from your tablet, and that would make it really easy to be able to access your garden and keep up with it. Next, we have another game published by Xbox on the original Xbox, and that is Kung Fu Chaos. Fun fact, this was a party game that was actually developed by Ninja Theory, which now is owned by Xbox, so this makes perfect sense. You have the publisher, Microsoft, all teamed up with the developer, once again, Ninja Theory. It makes perfect sense to bring back this Kung Fu party game to modern day. This is another Xbox exclusive that I really wish they would have made backwards compatible. I don't know if you guys have ever played this one. Let me know down in the comments below if you have. Next, we have Kameo 2. Kameo was such a beautiful game. It's definitely one of my favorite Xbox 360 launch titles. Again, you could probably imagine that, being that I'm a huge Rare fan. I felt that Kameo was true to the original Rare. I think that after they released Kameo and the Viva Piñata games, Rare personally fell off for me. When they had their whole Connect phase with the Connect Sports titles and all of that. Microsoft was totally wasting the talent at Rare by having them work on Connect games. Anyways, that's a whole nother rant. Kameo is a really great game. If you guys haven't played it already, I think it's on Xbox Game Pass because it's part of the Rare collection. If you haven't played it, play it. I think it's optimized for Xbox One X. It's not optimized for Series X yet, but to my knowledge, I don't think they've optimized any backwards compatible 360 titles to Xbox Series X enhancements quite yet. But hopefully we'll end up seeing that in the future. Either way, Kameo looks really good on a modern day console if you've never played it before. It's really starting to seem that the story of this video, at least so far, has been there's just a bunch of IPs that Xbox owns that they're not doing anything with. Kameo 2 would be an excellent exclusive. I don't know why they haven't worked on it yet. Hopefully it's in the works. I'd really love to see Kameo 2 specifically developed by Rare. I know Rare is working on Sea of Thieves updates as well as Everwild, but to be honest, Everwild doesn't look that great to me. I almost included it in my top 20 things for 2021, but I'm just not that psyched for the game. And again, I'm a huge Rare fan. I really think that Rare just needs to adjust, pivot, and go back to their classic franchises. Alright guys, and the last one, number 20, is Midtown Madness, another exclusive on the OG Xbox. Midtown Madness is actually owned by Microsoft. They own the IP, and they are definitely capable of releasing a sequel. I'm not too sure why the IP has been stagnant, but this was one of my favorite games on the original Xbox. I think it was included or bundled with an Xbox if you purchased it, at least at one point in time. a Midtown Madness 4 would definitely be much appreciated. Again, it's totally possible for Microsoft to do this. They own the IP for the game. Again, another really rare game, or at least I feel that it's rare. I don't see a lot of people talk about this game. So if you've played this game before, make sure to let me know down in the comments below. I'd really love to see a sequel, or maybe just even a remaster, or just make it a reboot. Who knows? Just call it Midtown Madness. Now that covers my top 20 recommendations to Xbox so that they could win 2021. I have 4 runners up, basically like honorable mentions. I'll go ahead and mention them here real quick before we end the video. These are ones that I almost included in my top 20. The first one being Everwild gameplay. Again, I'm a huge Rare fan, but they haven't shown any gameplay and I have no idea what's going on with this game. I'd really love to see some gameplay in 2021. Next one I had was Revive Brute Force. Brute Force had a ton of hype on the original Xbox, but failed to reach people's expectations. I think it has potential for a reboot. Next I have Crimson Skies, another Xbox exclusive to the original Xbox. And then finally, Mech Assault, another Xbox exclusive back in the day. I also recommend that Xbox focus on these 4 as well, however they did not make my top 20. Other than that, are you interested in finding out how Nintendo can win 2021 or how Sony can win 2021? Let me know down in the comments below and maybe I'll make a video. Other than that, I'd like to give a huge thank you to all of my Patreon subscribers. We just hit 20 patrons. I'd like to give a special shout out to everybody in the biggest fan club, including Tim G84, AOJ, Blackbird, and Kegger101. As always, I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe.